about to go you know where after this, so it's all right. So let's keep this super relaxed because it's Friday and it's career day, and you know what I mean. There's no reason for this to be stressful. I'm Jeffrey Leary. You guys heard the introduction. I did not humiliate my daughter like Becca's mom did, but I do have a daughter here. Who are freshmen? Sophomores? Juniors? Any seniors? My other son will be here in the fall, and he'll be a freshman. And I've got another one 2 years behind him. So. And I am alumni. I graduated in '96. So let's just talk about what I do, and we'll talk about how I got there. And then if there's questions, just talk. You don't have to raise your hand. I brought some toys you guys can look at later. So some of the implants we use to fix people. And then again, anything you guys want to talk about. You want to talk about the military part. You guys want to talk about the pathway. You want to talk about fettuccine alfredo over here. Whatever you want to do. So, orthopedic surgery. Basically, I am a doctor. I'm an MD, go through medical school. Orthopedic surgery specifically specializes in musculoskeletal systems, so bones, joints, ligaments, all that stuff, right? And that includes, I do a lot of trauma, meaning broken bones, okay? We put people back together again with plates and screws and rods, stuff like that. We do sports injuries, torn ligaments, stuff like that. Clearly that's not normal. There is a subspecialty in orthopedics where people just work on spine. You put, do fusions and all kinds of back surgeries, things like that. Arthritis, meaning hip and knee reconstruction. I do a lot of hip and knee reconstruction. That's a knee replacement for people with bad arthritis. People specialize in pediatric orthopedics, dealing with congenital deformities, club feet, things like that. There's a whole specialty in cancer. You guys can see the big tumor growing in the bone there. So orthopedics is a broad category, but all of it dealing with muscles, bones, ligaments, things like that. Okay? So the question I always get asked, was this always the plan? And I think I alluded to it. If you had told me when I was sitting where you guys were, I was going to be a doctor someday, I would have laughed at you. I was always pretty good at school. There was not like a STEM program here 30 years ago, but biology, math, that's the stuff I was good at. I did play soccer here, but that was not going to be a career move. Post high school, I went to Liberty University. I studied exercise science, so I was not a pre-med major. I have a minor in athletic training, a minor in chemistry. I finished undergrad in 3 years instead of 4. At the end of 3 years, I was working as an athletic trainer in the athletic training program. I was working full-time with the football team there, which is a D1 football. It actually made a bowl game this year for anyone who's paying attention. But they offered for me to stay on for a 4th year on scholarship if I wanted. At that point, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was like, what's the only thing I'm really good at? The only thing I was really good at was school. So I said, what's the hardest thing I could basically see myself doing for the next 30 years? And I decided, well, be a doctor, because why not? I crammed pre-med into 1 year because they were paying for it, which most people take 2 or 3 years. So I don't recommend doing it that way. But it was either that or come home and do it at community college and pay for it, or do it for free down there. So I stayed at Liberty, did all my pre-med stuff in 1 year. Took my MCATs at the end of my 4th year of college, because normally you would take it at the end of your 3rd year, because it's a year from the time you take your MCAT, which is your medical school entrance exam. It's a year application process. So normally you would take a 3rd year, that way you know if you got into med school, and most people roll right out of college right into medical school, right? So I took a year off because it was a year process, came home. I was working, teaching school during the day and waiting tables at night, making some money. I applied to 1 school. Most people apply to probably 20 or 30, but I was of the mentality, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. Applied to 1, got in early decision, and at Rutgers, and started school the next year. So once I got accepted, then I had to start thinking about how am I going to pay for all this, because it ain't cheap. So I ended up looking at military scholarships, got accepted by the Air Force. They paid for all of my medical school. The trade-off was I owed them 4 years of my soul, because once you finish, you go active duty, right? And at the time, it was 2001, and nothing was going on in the world. Signed on the dotted line. 2 months later, the trade centers came down. It was like, oh crap, like the world just changed, right? So, long story short, did 4 years of med school. It's another 4 years. I always knew I wanted to do orthopedics, okay? So as I was working as an athletic trainer down at Liberty, I used to work with the team surgeons, and was like, you know what, if I gotta do something, I'm gonna do that. So I knew going into medical school, that was a means to an end for me to do orthopedics. There are tons of specialties within medicine. I mean, you can do, there's no family practice, pediatrics, you can do oncology, you can do urology, you can do OB, deliver, there's hundreds of subspecialties. So certainly there's more to medicine than just what I do. General surgery, doing belly stuff, brain surgery, neurosurgery, all these things. So med school was a means to an end for me. So after I finished my 4 years of school, you apply then for residency. That's now you're getting into your specialty training. So for orthopedics, it's another 5 years, right? So you did 4 years of college, you did 4 years of med school. Now I got 5 more years of training to do orthopedics. The year I was in, because I was in the military, they had the final say. They didn't have to let me do it. I think 50 guys applied that year for residency spots in orthopedics, and they only let 7 out. I was one of them, so I was fortunate. Then I went and did my 5-year residency in orthopedics. When I finished residency, now it's time to pay the piper, right? So the whole time I was in school, actually, not only did I not have to pay for school, I got a check, like a cost of living check. I was getting paid to go to med school. The military was paying me, so it helped me pay my rent. I got married between first and second year, so it was helpful my wife was working obviously, but it definitely helped offset some of the cost. They pay for your books, they pay for everything. So it's a pretty good deal until that day you finish residency, and all of a sudden it's like, you know what, you're going active duty. So finished that July. At that point I got approached about doing things on the special operations side of the world. That was voluntary, they can't make you do it. I took the opportunity. We moved down to Alabama, and we were there for a couple weeks, and ended up then going away to do a bunch of man camp stuff. So once you're on the special forces side of the world, it's not just being a doctor. Like, there's doctors in the military who are just on bases doing the doctor thing. Once you go to the special operations side, the mission's very different. So we were going to really bad places doing kind of cool guy stuff, but you have to get trained to do that. So I went away for 4 or 5 months, did lots of shooting and jumping out of helicopters and blowing stuff up and high-speed driving and night missions and night vision and all the stuff you see on TV, I've done. So it's not like the average doctor pathway in the military. There's only a very small minority that end up going that way, and it was an opportunity. Again, you volunteer for it. I don't regret it, but it was a whole different thing than just being like a military doctor hanging out on base here in the U.S. So right after about 4 months away, came home only for a couple weeks, and then found out my team was getting deployed to Afghanistan. Left for Afghanistan right after Christmas that year. Was gone for about 6 months, came home, was home for about a year, went back for another almost a year. So I was gone about 2 out of 4 years while I was in the military. At that point, I had 3 kids under 4, so you miss lots of stuff. I mean, you're overseas. Doing what I did, you were going to places where there were weeks where you'd fall off the map. There was no communication. Like we always had a kind of a satellite phone. You couldn't always use that, so you would definitely go long periods of time without talking to your family. FaceTime and things have changed that a lot, as opposed to I can't imagine what it was like back in World War II or Vietnam, where it was you're writing letters and that was it. So FaceTime has definitely changed the deployment thing, but it was interesting. You're falling off the map for long periods of time. You're missing birthdays and Christmases and all that stuff. So that being said, do I regret it? No, I would absolutely do it again. But when my time was up, they were not getting overtime. The getting shot at thing is only fun on TV. The real life version of that is not nearly as exciting when you're living it. So that's how I got to where we are today. And I think I just basically did that slide without that slide. Questions about any of that? So during my time in the military, my team, it was a 6-man team, and essentially we were running an OR and an ICU system out of 30-pound backpacks. So when small teams of guys, like SEAL teams and stuff like that, were going to really bad places where medevac wouldn't go. If something happened, the helicopters were coming to get you, my team would go with them to make sure if someone got hurt, there were some sort of medical, surgical support, right? So this is, that's, doesn't look like a team of doctors, but that's my surgical team. So that was 2011 in Afghanistan. We were living out in the middle of villages, living dirty, no water, no electricity, things like that. It was a very, very different military mission than the Big Blue or Big Green military, where you're hanging out on a military base not doing anything. So My team was the first team ever in the United States. We got embedded full-time at the University of Alabama, and what that means is, even though I was active duty, when we were in the States, we were working full-time at a civilian trauma center here. So instead of being on a military base, I worked at the University of Alabama. The point being is that it kept us very busy surgically, meaning doing lots of cases, seeing lots of patients. So when it was time to go overseas and do cool guy stuff, our skills were sharp. We weren't sitting around doing nothing. We were ready to go because you're getting placed into really bad situations, and you want to make sure that your skill set is ready to go from a surgical standpoint, taking care of really badly injured people. So that was, again, doesn't look like a bunch of docs, but that's a team of doctors hanging out in Afghanistan there. So, anybody know which one's me?
The one on the far left.
Left.
So what's my life like? Currently, I work for Atlantic Health, so it's a big health system there. We have, the system owns 5 hospitals. I practice in an office, so like Mondays and Wednesdays are my OR days. I operate every Monday and Wednesday like clockwork, pretty much all day. I'll do anywhere between 6 and 10 surgeries a day. Tuesday, Thursday, Fridays, I'm in the office seeing patients. Either pre-op, people come and see me to figure out if they need surgery, or post-op, after surgery, doing recovery stuff. I take call, meaning you cover emergency room stuff. You can get called. When I'm on call, you can call in the middle of the night. Someone falls down, breaks something. So there's lots of nights where you're getting woken up in the middle of the night. It's part of the job. Other specialties don't do that, but when you're a surgeon, that is definitely part for the course. What else? I've got 7 partners right now in my group. I have a PA that helps. I teach, so the residents from Rutgers come to my hospital. So I do have residents in the OR with me. I do teach full time, so I always have doctors in training with me, which is good. It keeps you honest, makes you to make sure you're current with your reading. Always trying to stay caught up on what's the latest and greatest, because you're teaching what's the latest and greatest. I do robotics, so there is, if you're a STEM guy into robotics, there's a whole field of robotic surgery. I started the robotics program at our hospital. And we can talk about that if you want. And there's all kinds of things we could talk about. So there's always the questions, I guess, that sort of come up, the generic stuff. Do I have to be pre-med? No, you do not have to be a pre-med major in college. I wasn't, to go into medicine. You do have to have a certain amount of biologies, chemistries, physics. There's a bunch of courses you have to take because you have to be prepared to take the MCAT. But you don't have to be a pre-med major. I was exercise science. I knew people who were history majors. I know a guy in med school who was an English major, decided to go with med school anyway. Experience, everybody asks that. It's helpful, I think, in high school if you want to try to start volunteering. Just kind of figure out, either at a hospital, they have summer programs, or in a doctor's office, shadow somebody. Start figuring out if you even like taking care of sick people, or if you even like taking care of injured people. If you do a couple days and you're like, man, this is not, I really don't like sick people, then you're probably going into the wrong career. And there's nothing wrong with starting to figure that out in high school. I didn't, but I have kids in high school sometimes come to my office. I know at our hospital we have a very robust summer program for high school volunteers if they kind of want to be around the hospital setting and just kind of get your feet wet a little bit and see what it's all about. It is important, I think, in college to start trying to get into some research projects. It doesn't have to be doing anything in the field you want to go into, but it helps sort of increase your resume, shows you have an interest in science. A lot of people, when they're applying for med school, all look the same. Like, everyone's a pre-med major, everybody did some research, everybody did some volunteer work. Find ways to be different. Do something no one else is doing, and I don't know what that is for you. Some people do overseas mission work. Some people do inner city volunteer. Do stuff. You have to start doing stuff that shows, A, that you're a hard worker, that you're able to deal with people, that you have an interest in it. And not necessarily at this stage in your life, and not really in high school, but in college, that's important. You got to start looking at that stuff. It is important to have people skills in most fields of medicine because you're talking to patients all day. If you hate talking to people, but you still want to do the doctor thing, you can go into like radiology or pathology where you're not actually seeing patients, but you're still a doctor and doing things like that. My favorite days of the week are my OR days because A, I get to do stuff, and B, I don't have to talk to anybody because it's exhausting talking to like 50 patients a day. And it's not my forte. but it is part of the deal. And if you really, really don't like interacting with people, then medicine may not be the best field for you. You may want to go to research. Some of the scientists that we had here today doing bench research. If you love the sciences but not the patient care aspect, there's great fields. If you really like the physics and the bioengineering, you can get into implant design. I got a bunch of implants over here. I've been involved on that on the clinical side. I've done some plate design for a company a couple years ago. I currently work on the side for a company called Stryker, which manufactures implants. I help teach their sales guys about the implants. I help teach residents. I do courses and things like that. So product and implant design is a really cool field you can go into if you're interested but don't want to do the medicine thing. And you really, really have to be prepared to make sacrifice. It's a long road. It is a very long road. If you want to do well, you have to, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's a lot of studying. I mean, you can ask my wife, when I was studying for my boards, I was honest to God studying 16 hours a day. Like I'd get up at 6 and I wouldn't stop studying until midnight. I'd get up and do it again. Like, so if you hate school, medicine's probably not for you, because it's incredibly rewarding on the tail end, but the road there, it is, you gotta understand, like you can't just coast through med school. You have to study, like, and it's an enormous volume of information you have to learn. So that being said, again, if I had to do it again, I absolutely would. But you have to sort of go into it eyes wide open. It's a lot. So if you look at everything I've done, and someone asked me on the way over how many years, from kindergarten till done, it was 28 years of education to where I am today. That's because I did a surgical specialty, which is a longer residency, and I did 2 fellowships, which is another 2 years of training, but 28 years total, start to finish, which is more than half my life. That being said, it's an incredibly rewarding field. I get to fix broken people. I get to make people walk again. I see people on the worst day of their lives, and the next day they're walking around. So orthopedics is one of the few fields in medicine where you get instant gratification, right? If you're doing internal medicine or cardiology and all these things where you're just helping, you're helping sick people, or cancer, are you really curing people? Or sometimes, but people come in to see me, they're broken, and when they leave, they're fixed. So you get to see you get a lot of instant gratification from it. So it's one of the few fields of medicine where you can actually see the difference in a very short period of time, and you're actually changing people's lives immediately. And I find that incredibly rewarding. So. Is there a future? Everybody was asking, am I going to get a job? Is it worth it? At the end of the day, you guys all need to get a job someday, right? I mean, that's the reality, and you got to work for a long time. That's life. Currently, I just looked up the stats last night. That first one, I mean, they were estimating by next year there was going to be a shortage of 100,000 doctors, a shortage. The most recent one is by 2034, they're recommending, estimating, 127,000 doctors they're going to need, meaning the population is getting bigger, not enough people are becoming doctors, so there's a shortage. So as far as job security and always having a job, yeah, you will always have a job. So there's something to be said about making the investment, because you're going to get the return on your investment, just not until 10 years later when you're done with all that school. But any questions about that? I think that's all I've got from the slide standpoint. So the floor is open.
Oh, can you take us through one of your surgeries and how exactly you did it?
I mean, we could pull up a YouTube video or something. What do you want to talk
So how exactly do you implant the rods and all this stuff into the patients and secure it and make sure that the bone really good work?
So if someone breaks their hip, let's just say, let's I can show you tons of x-rays if that's what you want to see, but here we go. Where it is. How do I make this bigger now? Hold on 1 second here. Let's just skip ahead to the back and show you. So let's say somebody falls. So that's a femur, okay? Femur bone. They break their hip, right? Everybody good? This is simple stuff. This is very, very common in elderly patients. Grandma falls. At a certain point in your life, you stop bouncing, you break. Okay, I mean that's the reality of it. Hip fractures are incredibly common. So let's say you break your hip. All right, so we gotta fix that, or you can't walk on that, right? Because your hip's broken. So the common treatment for that, let's say, okay, just as an example. So if you broke your leg right through here, you generally use something called a nail or a rod. Okay, and you can pass this around if you want. It's some version of this. And the way you would fix that, again, that's what an X-ray would look like with a device like that in it, right? So you make a small incision up on the hip, kind of dissect down. You actually drill a hole in the top of the bone. You kind of manipulate that. We have special tables which allow you to pull and push, and you can put certain instruments in to get the bone, put the jigsaw puzzle back together again first. And then you would actually put this rod in once you've opened up the top of it. Then you'd make another incision out farther down. I think I have another talk I can show you. If you make a second incision, you're going to put a wire up into the bone so you know where it is. And then over that wire, you're going to drill a bigger channel. And then that screw has a hole in it, so it can go over the wire so we know exactly where it's going. Because you can't just like randomly put screws into people if you don't know where they're going. It's bad for business. As you can see, that has a hole in it if you look down the center. Right?
Yeah.
So you put a wire in there, now that screw will follow the wire up, and now you've pulled the fracture back together again. And then they can walk on that an hour later if they want. Does that help?
Yeah, that
And we can get into all kinds of crazy fractures if you want, but
What's the worst fracture you could possibly work on?
that's a loaded question. I mean, like what?
The longest process, like to fix.
Pelvic fractures are really bad. You blow your pelvis up. Motorcycles in the trees, things like that. Bad day. I'm trying to see if I have. Hold on a second here. I could show you lots of different fractures if that's what you want to see. Sorry, I can't see. It's too
What is
small.
this?
That's a shoulder blade.
Oh, that's cool.
What's the most difficult surgery you ever done? Like you worked on?
What was the question?
What was the most difficult?
surgery you ever had to
I
do?
don't know. I do a lot. I've done a lot of bad fractures, especially when I was in the military. Give me 1 second. I've got
It's a hard one.
I mean, as far as difficult pelvic fractures, of course, there's arteries, there's nerves, there's bad stuff. People are generally trying to bleed to death but I mean, you have people come in and break 3 or 4, or, both legs are broken, both arms are broken. I mean, there's really bad trauma, these bad car accidents where you can spend hours and hours putting people back together again.
Have you ever messed up?
Not catastrophically. How's that? Like I've never had someone die on the table or something like that. If that's what you're asking, I've had patients who died later from the injuries they had and things like that. I have, again, knock on wood. Like I've never done something to somebody that I was the reason they died. If that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
If that was the case,
Where's that lawyer guy? No, I'm kidding.
if that was the case, what would happen to you?
I mean, there's always every time you operate on someone, you can get sued. That's the United States. You can do nothing wrong to somebody and still get sued. Depends on how bad. And, I mean, you can. Oh, that went fast.
Have you ever been sued?
Once, but it got dismissed.
How much do you get paid?
Enough that my kids aren't going to starve, and they can go to Timothy Christian.
I need to know this. I need to know where the money is.
I was fortunate to have the military scholarship, so like me and my wife were both full scholarship for undergrad. She was a soccer player and I had training stuff, and then I had med school paid for by the military. So I started life with 0 debt. which is huge, right? I've had friends who came out of fellowship who were $700,000 in the hole. Like, trying to start your life out owing the better part of $1 million, like, that's not a place you want to be. So find ways to get scholarships, study hard. I mean, you're going to have to take out loans at some point, but find ways. And, you know, listen, I don't regret the military thing, but it's, you know, they own you for 4 years.
Yep.